So as we go around this machine, I want to explain to you what these particular items do. In the back here, you can see that there's a gauge. That is actually a Magna helix gauge. The Magna helix gauge works in conjunction with the other end as well. So it's not confusing or difficult. All it does is I'm looking for differentiation of pressure from one side to the other. So when I explain to you how that one works, when I get to the other end, you'll go, that's pretty simple. As far as this is concerned, you can see I've got the stainless steel swaged gas line, the gas bottle itself, a tap here, then I've got a series of regulators as the gas goes through. So what do I have to do to get the gas to work on this? It's relatively simple. Just make sure that when you attach the gas to the gas line to the bottle, this is a quick release, so you pull that particular swage back, put the connection in, then you can turn the gas on. What I suggest you do is make sure that where it's screwed into the bottle, it's tight. What I do have sitting here when I am working this with gas is I will have a small bottle of water and detergent, so that when I squirt that onto these fittings, I ensure that they are sealed. The last thing you want on site is gas leaking everywhere. The big plus with LPG, of course, is I can smell it. But I just make sure that when I do attach these particular hoses, a quick squirt just to ensure that they are sealed and there's no risk of any gas escaping. As far as this is concerned, it's all plumb and compliant to a standard. It is regularly serviced and checked at BlastOne, and the guys are quite pedantic in making sure that all the appropriate paperwork is filled out in relation to the gas side of this. So you can be confident that when you do get this particular machine on site, all of this has been checked and serviced prior to you utilising the machine. On the back here, we've got our operational procedure booklet with all the information in relation to this particular machine stored within this. I suggest you keep that closed so that the weather doesn't penetrate or permeate the paperwork within inside, so that you can read it and refer back to it if you have any questions. Further to that, if you have any further questions you can't find it in the book, ring the help desk at BlastOne. The guys will help you out. Everybody at BlastOne is conducive with the operation of this particular machine and can help you relatively quickly to get you up and running without losing time on site. On the end here, we've got the beginning of what we're going to discuss in relation to inlets and outlets. So this smaller one here is drawing the ambient air. So it will still take some ambient air whilst it's doing its due process in relation to what you're trying to control within your encapsulation. So what can happen is we're looking at how many times in an hour it can process the air. So it's sort of like breathing into a plastic bag. Not that I would recommend it. But if you breathe into a plastic bag, what you'll do is you'll exhaust the oxygen within that environment. Does that make sense? If I breathe into a plastic bag, I'll exhaust. Well, it does, because you're processing that air through your lungs. So ultimately, the air that's contained within that plastic bag becomes null and void or starved of oxygen. Basically, this does the same thing. So it still needs to draw a little bit of ambient air back through this, which is processed within the whole machine to ensure that the air where you're working within the cycles of air changes per hour are relative to what the moisture content is and what it's controlling. So as I say, it's just like breathing into a bag. Eventually we have to change out some of that air. That's what this does. There is, down the bottom here, your fire extinguisher. And now we're starting to talk about these adjustable flaps, or the duct within inside this ducting housing itself. So what this is a damper adjustment. So it gives me the opportunity to dampen the air that's flowing through there. So what I'm doing is I'm restricting the free flow of air in relation to where it's going. But now we begin to make sense of what that Magna helix gauge was up there. This damper gives me the opportunity to control the Magna helix gauge, or the airflow that's coming through here. So the Magna helix gauge gives me an indication of where I need to be in relation to the standard operational procedure for this particular piece of equipment. So the Magna helix gauge up there, what I need to do is I need to have it on 1 to 1.5. So when we start the machine and we show you what that should look like, you'll go, oh yeah, that's relatively simple. So the equalization of air, what we're doing for the machine is we're sort of like pumping one side up and holding the other side back so that we get an equilibrium of air. Instead of it flowing through one side and just exhausting, the desiccant wheel doesn't have time to process that air. So it's sort of like a weight and measure. So if we hold one side up, we push the air in one side, we try and hold the other side up to give it a balance of air in and air out. Then the desiccant wheel spinning around like this, taking the moisture out, has the capacity to be able to process that correctly and send it out the other side. So this is the first of our dampers, and this is the air that's going out to you. So this is the air that is processed. So we are on the process side of the machine. So the air's already been dried and comes out this side. So you can see it's quite a big duct. And your ducting is relatively simple because all it does is slides over the top of this, and then we put a clamp around the outside of it on that gland to hold the ducting on there. So when we start attaching ducting to this particular machine, we start to ensure also that all of this is clean, it's wiped out, and the ducting slides over relatively simple, because if the ducting's been dragged through the dirt and the mud, you'll find it's very hard to get it over this section. So by wiping it, making sure the ducting's clean, is it the right size ducting? Quickly sort out whether it is or not, because it won't fit. So the ducting that's sent with this machine is the appropriate ducting and does slide over the top. The one important thing to remember is that when you use the ducting on this, check it for damage, make sure it hasn't been perforated, and ensure that you do extend it to its capacity. Primarily because what you've got to remember is that this has got a massive volume of air that it's sending out and pulling in. So if your ducting's not appropriated correctly, the ducting can actually collapse on itself by being sucked into the ribs within the ducting. More so too, if you've got a hole in there, that means that it's drawing air out of here and not out of the encapsulation that I'm trying to control. So the webbing in the ducting, just check to make sure it's in good repair, there's no holes in the hoses, or the ducting I should say, and your clamps are appropriate in such a manner that they don't have air escaping. So really it's just common sense. If you make sure all those parameters are followed, and again, address your SOP, your standard operational procedure in relation to this, you can't go wrong. It is relatively simple. But the air coming from this side is actually, it's blowing it out. So you'll have no problem with getting the ducting to open up, because if you condense the ducting, what's going to happen is just like blowing up a balloon. It'll go and open up like so. So the ducting on this side, just make sure that you have arranged it in nice big radiuses, so when it goes like this and blows up, you'll find that it's in situ straight away. So just appropriate it so that it's not rubbing against anything and fibrillating on an area where it can fray the ducting. Also too, if you lay it on the ground, just make sure it's not on a rough terrain like big rocks and so forth, because it will tend to fibrillate a little bit and rub a hole in the ducting. So it's a good point to lay some power clad down first, sit the ducting on that. You can even use cardboard if you wish to, a canvas tarp. I really don't care in relation to what you elect, but what I do employ you to do is make sure you do put something underneath that ducting